Yeah.
Go for it.
I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Came out to the West Coast. Got my undergraduate degree at San Jose State University, and went into the high tech industry. I was in telecommunications, worked for AT&T and some other companies, and I came up frequently to the Northwest because did a lot of work with Intel, and just fell in love with it. Said I'm going to move here someday, and when my kids were born, and decided time to leave California and move to someplace where people are kind and decent and not running off the road. Came up here, went to work for a company called GST Telecom, and we built out fiber optic networks all throughout the western U.S. And always thought that I would want to give back to the community someday in some way. And when I was building networks out there, I would always have to meet with all the politicians in any town, and so I'd meet with city councils and county commissioners and mayors and governors and all that sort of thing. And I found that consistently they were decent folks, regardless of their party, that they really cared about their constituents, and I thought this would be something I'd be interested in someday. I met Brian Baird before he was a congressman, actually, and really impressed. He was really understood my industry in detail, not only what we were trying to do, but how we were capitalized and how we were marketed. Was concerned about how we treated our employees, and I was very impressed. And so I started to follow Brian's career a little bit and supported him. And then I spent the last few years of my telecom career in Holland and had a really wonderful experience. And it gave you kind of an international understanding of the world that I thought was really helpful. So when I came back, I went back to school, got a master's degree in public administration from Washington State University, Vancouver, and went to work for Senator Cantwell as her outreach director, and actually spent a fair amount of time here working with Maria. And I was her representative to what is essentially the 3rd Congressional District. We had a little bit of area outside of it, but essentially the same. Gave me a good grounding, I thought, in politics. And then I worked for 3.5 years as the executive director of the Gifford Pinchot Task Force, which is an environmental nonprofit. And took a leave of absence from there this March to run. And basically I decided that I thought I could do a job like Brian did, where he was really had, as a congressperson, he was really in touch with the community, and I felt that's been a little lacking. And I really appreciated what he did and how approachable. Not everywhere you go are your politicians very approachable, and it makes a big difference. And as a congressperson, I think it's really, really important that people have access to you and that you really represent everyone. And if somebody wants to get in your face, they can do that. Whether it's, I don't need everybody patting me on the back all the time. So this opportunity came up. I was encouraged by, I don't know if you know Val and Dan Ogden, they're kind of people who are very instrumental in guiding the community in Vancouver. And they asked me to run, and they're just such wonderful. Unfortunately, Val passed away this year in her mid-90s, but led a wonderful, exemplary life. And so a little bit in her honor, I'm moving forward to run.
All right. You, in your candidate statement, you talked about your history of creating jobs. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that would play into if you were elected to Congress?
Sure. I think it's right now one of the biggest problems we have in this country, and particularly in this county, is that we have a jobless recovery. There's a lot of money in the country right now. We've seen the stock market crazy this week, but generally there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of trillions and trillions of uninvested money, as well as all the money in the stock market. But what I'm not seeing there is that we have particularly young people going into careers where they can see a path to prosperity. You might be able to get a job, you might be able to work for minimum wage, but we don't have what we really need for someone to come into this marketplace. Now when I came up for GST, we were a very small company, 6 or 7 employees to start with, and we had over 750 employees when I left. And I've worked with other startups, I've had my own companies, and I've worked for very big companies. So I've seen a variety of different ways that we can, encourage growth and get young people into a career path. And, part of that is education. That's a big issue, and I see it a lot here. So I think there's a lot we can do, but we're not going to do very well as an economy if we don't have a strong middle class, because that's where your purchasing power comes in. Right now, I think we're out of balance, and I think we need to evolve that in order to build a sustainable, strong economy.
You've and you touched on it there a little bit, but you've criticized Jamie for being intentionally limiting voter participation. Can you expound on that a little bit, and then explain what you are and would do differently?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Jamie's a very nice person. I mean, I've worked with her off and on when I was with Maria's office, and she was in the legislature. Sure. But she's not particularly engaged. One of the things that she doesn't seem comfortable with the town hall. May not be her thing. That's okay. For me, it would be. We need to get people. We saw that the voter turnout for the primary was like 28%. That's abominable. And the only way you really get people to participate is if they feel empowered. And the only way that I feel that you can really make people feel that they can make a difference by voting, particularly young people, is if they get to know that their elected leadership are people just like them, and then you could talk to them, and you can be honest, and you can be candid, you can complain, you can give accolades. But if you're just back in DC, and if you've not had experience outside of the political world, it's hard to relate. That becomes, DC world becomes very insular over time, and people get what I describe as the capital-shaped head, where everything you think about is how is it going to affect us politically. If I vote for that, how's it going to affect my next election, or what will my colleagues say? But if you don't have a little political courage and put your career at risk at times, you really don't get a whole lot done.
One of the things I think you've hit on is she doesn't do town halls, or there's not many town halls anymore. But then when Brian Baird was in office, at one point he said he wasn't going to do town halls, and came back and did it, but it was because of that really aggressive, combative crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand that reasoning? And
Oh yeah, sure. And that what Jamie said, I think, was that she believed that some people would be discouraged in speaking if it was in that type of environment where they felt they wouldn't be comfortable speaking out. Doesn't mean you can't do both. I mean, you can still do the little coffees, the small meetings, the intimate one-on-ones, that's fine. But you also need to have that large and robust town hall. And you really, if you filter out the people that are disagreeing with you, you never learn. You need to hear the opposition. You need to talk to people who think you're dead wrong. And you need to listen with the intent of understanding, not just formulating your response. So you have to have that, I think it's a acquired skill, a good listening skill, and you can only do that by being thrust into the forefront.
What's your take on, I mean, Congress is incredibly unpopular, yet, incumbents are still leading, and Jamie being an example. Why is that? How do you combat that?
Well, I think you've seen a lot of it. Congress was always fought. I mean, if you read history, you see that it's always been combative. Combative is fine, but it's the nasty, vituperative nature of that combat, and it's the unwillingness to work together. Now, we've seen where, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan could certainly work together, even though they were in opposition in many, many things. And we see now, like, environmental issues are bad bad Democrat liberal things, but it used to seem like EPA came out under Nixon, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Clean Water Act, all under a Republican president. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge was Eisenhower. So if we work together, we can get so much more done. Not to say that it's ever going to be easy, but if we work together, we can certainly get more done than if we work at odds. If the idea is to make the other person fail rather than make America succeed, you're in the wrong job. And yet, certainly there's politics there, I get that. But you need to go in there with the idea that I'm going to do the best thing for America, not the best thing for my party.
And you're battling in a real, you get $20,000 cash on hand about compared to going on $1 million for her. How do you go about campaigning that way? How do you get your message out there? Is that with those town halls and these events?
That's part of it. We have to be more targeted. Understand, where we need to go to get the votes, and we've done a lot of very technical analysis to find out where we need to go. So one side of it is me getting out everywhere and meeting everyone I possibly can. And then the part that my team is doing is they're very focused. And we also do some very creative things depending on who we're trying to reach out. Of course, young people have more social media ways they communicate. But we're also taking a group of older people and having them handwrite letters, handwritten, cursive, when we address older people. So different approaches for different people, and we think it's going to be very successful. We look at what Obama did in finding more creative ways to reach out. I mean, a lot of people didn't think he'd really have much of a chance, and then right at the end of his campaign, his social marketing program worked really well. So, it's always tough to beat an incumbent. That's always the case. It's the number one indicator of who's going to win and who's going to lose. Ultimately, though, incumbents lose. And, sometimes it's a confluence of luck, timing, and hard work. And that's what we're hoping for.
Do you agree with the assessment that the redistricting that went on kind of made this less of a competitive district?
Definitely, and I think that's what we see across the country. That's the intent. That we changed the districts, and taking Olympia out certainly was to the benefit. I mean, Denny Heck was able to win in the 10th, the newly created 10th. It made the third a little less competitive, but the changes we see in this district have been really dramatic in the past 4 or 5 years. If you look at the demographic makeup, where the district's getting younger, it's getting more multiracial, it's really changed quite a bit. So it's not as great as it once was, and I think even at the very beginning, the projections were Jamie against an unnamed opponent was only a +2 to a +4, and that's not that dramatic.
Right here in Lewis County, obviously a very conservative district, and there are a lot of people that share your frustrations with Jamie Herrera Butler. What's your pitch to those voters to say, come on over to my side?
It's really got to be focused on what the needs are in your particular county, in your particular district, because it's very different in Pacific, Lewis, Klickitat, and Clark County. And I've been working with people here off and on now for quite a long time. One of the things that's really an issue here when I talk to the teachers, it's finding that specific constituency and find out what they care about. So I talked to the teachers. I said, what can I do if I were to go to DC to help you in education? Number one thing, poverty. They said that's the thing that we combat the most here. 85% free and assisted lunches. That's quite a lot. This whole state, there's quite a lot in the state too, by the way. I think it's an average of something like 53%. And now some of the schools have gone completely free and assisted lunches to take away the stigma, which I think is a wonderful idea. But you have to look at what the needs are there and find out, talk a little bit one-on-one. The Affordable Care Act is one of those things that's evolved so much in the past year. A year ago, everybody hated it. Now, a lot of people are finding benefit in it. A lot of people here I've talked to that say, well, yeah, I couldn't get health care before, now I do. I'm no longer restricted because of a pre-existing medical issue. So while that was considered a negative early on for Democrats, now it's becoming a positive. But there's still some of that predisposition. So, part of it too, a big part of it is listen to what they're saying and don't discount it out of hand. Because someone is an arch conservative doesn't mean they can't say some pretty smart things that you need to fully understand. Everyone is your constituent. Once you win, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or someone. Most people, frankly, not that interested in politics. They want to just get by every day. They want a good job. They want health care. They want their family to be safe. All those types of things. And if you can do that for them, it doesn't matter. And that's growing. Less and less people define themselves by party than ever before. So it's just, being honest and being there when you're needed.
And it's obviously this isn't a congressional issue, but we have the 2 initiatives on background checks at the state legislature. Could you talk about your opinions on gun control?
Sure. I think, I'm a gun owner, I hunt, but we have 8 children a day on average are killed by gun violence. So we do need to do something about that. And what I think is a real concern for me is that we stop the discussion when people say Second Amendment. And that's okay. I don't want to get rid of the Second Amendment, nor do I want to take people's guns away. But we have to have the hard discussion. Gun violence is epidemic. multiple killings have gone up by 50% in the last 7 years. Those are horrible numbers. We have to do something about these. I think these background check is a plus. In states that have more stringent background checks, domestic violence has gone down by 35% or so, and violence against police officers also goes down dramatically. So I think there are things we can do. There are, you fish, there are a lot of laws about fishing. You can't use treble hooks, you can't, use various things to fish, you can only use certain kinds of tackle. And we seem to be okay with that. But when we have any discussion about guns, red flags go up all over the place. So there's a sensible solution here without infringing on people's Second Amendment rights.
So we're not going to solve the world's problems in 20 minutes in here, but I want to give you an opportunity just to talk about an issue you'd like to talk about with your remaining time.
Sure.
Or a number of issues that you'd like.
Yeah, I think, the biggest issue I think we need to face in this country right now, if we want to continue to compete on a worldwide stage, and we want to get an average of less than 5% unemployment in this country, we have to do something about our educational policies here. The thing that's most daunting to me is that we have across this nation a 20% high school dropout rate. That's 1 in 5 kids that will drop out of high school. If we expect to have a 5% or less unemployment rate, we need to fix that. And it's not just by making every kid go to, by having every child go to college, and it's not about, forcing teachers to commit to a test like No Child Left Behind. We need to fully fund the schools here in the state, the McCleary decisions, we need to clearly adhere to that. But we also need to look at it from a national level. We have a federal government program that supplies somewhere around 7% of most schools' funding, yet they have a disproportionate dictate to the schools. The people that are in the schools, the teachers, anybody an ex-teacher in here? There are a lot of people in your industry that were teachers at one time for whatever reason. The teachers are the closest to the kids. They know what their strengths are, they know what their weaknesses are. They know when they learn, they're picking it up, they learn when they're not understanding it. There's more children with disabilities that are mainstream. So you have a classroom with varying levels of understanding whatever subject you are teaching, and you have other issues. We need to get class sizes down to a manageable level. When teachers have children who are special needs, they need the tools to be able to teach them, and we need to fund all the technical tools that will make our kids competitive. Part of it too is going back to things like teaching skills that aren't just college prep. There are a lot of kids. There's still less than 30% less than a third of people graduate from college. So that means you have people that need desperately to learn skills that will allow them to earn family wage jobs. And there's jobs in agriculture, there's trade jobs, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need carpenters, we need all those things. We need to teach those kids those fundamental skills. And it needs to start in high school. We also need to teach things that are the soft skills. One of the things when I talk to business people and say, kid coming out of high school is going to work, SEH America is a big employer in Clark County. What's the one thing you want kids to know? They said show up on time. You probably have that issue in some of your work too. So if we're going to compete on that world stage and we're going to have sustainable economies that are strong, we need to really focus on our schools. I know every teacher I know is working hard, and I don't think that's the problem, though we do need to give them ongoing training, because things change. You get more history every year, you need new things, and you need to engage kids. So I think that's a big part of it. The other thing I want to touch on just real briefly, and so I don't go too far over time, is we're facing another war. This is a big crisis in this country right now. I think I'm extremely disappointed that our Congress decided to go home instead of focusing on this issue and coming together. The President and Congress need to agree on a plan to rout out ISIL. If they're not in agreement, they're going to be fighting each other. if they haven't all committed to it, they'll be pointing at the other guy, so, well, your idea's not working, well, your idea's not working, well, we need to come at it together. We also need, if we're really gonna do this, as an American people, we need to understand that there's a price to be paid. And that price is financial for one. If they're gonna, one of the things I thought that would be great, if you're a congressperson and you're going to agree that we're going to go into this war, whatever the ultimate strategy is, then you need to go back to your district and tell the people in your district that they need to pay for it, that there's going to be taxation. We're still paying for the Iraq war. We're probably paying for it for a long time, even though we were told that it was going to be short, cheap, and easy. So, this is something that, World War II, people went without butter and sugar, they wouldn't ration gasoline. When people came back from the war, they saw that the American people had a stake in it as well. Kids coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan come back, they've had up to 10 deployments, and they come back and they find an America that has no idea what went on and no one who had any skin in the game, and that's one of the big problems. They should be coming back to jobs, they should be coming back to healthcare, and they should be coming back to an America that had a stake in this as well. I think that's a big issue.
I'm glad you touched on that. I was going to ask. One more final question, because we're about a minute and a half over. But just a question we're asking everyone. What's one thing the voters don't know about you?
Well, I think the thing that the voters don't know about me, because I ran an environmental nonprofit, the first reaction to that is, oh, some nutbag lefty environmentalist tree hugger. But for me, it's there's a pragmatic way to be an environmentalist. I ran the Gifford-Pinchot Task Force, and we've been for 10 years or more creating ways to work together. The Gifford-Pinchot Forest, by virtue of being a national forest, has the duty to be not only preservation, but an economic driver. And you need to find that balance. So I think people really need to know that there is a way to be a pragmatic, reasonable environmentalist, and we can have sustainable forest practices that keep people employed.
Anything else, anyone? Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.